Hello, this is Deb with the UAP Medical Coalition. Today, Linda is here to speak about her encounters with UAPs and more. Um, I would like to explain to the audience that the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this video belong solely to the speakers and not necessarily to the UAP Medical Coalition, its employees, volunteers, or affiliates. All medical references are for informational purposes only. This is not a consultation or a therapy session, and this content can be triggering for some and is not meant for children. Linda, thank you for joining me today. Could you please let people know a little bit about your background and who you are?
Yes. Okay. So my family started having experiences when I was very little. I believe that they had individually had experiences before, but we did have group experiences. And then that continued individually through our lives. Of course, we were always told, that it was something else going on. And so, that gets very frustrating, especially when, it's like make believe, but yet I couldn't talk about it. So, if I went to school, somebody's house, whatever, church, and I said anything about this topic or what was going on, my mom would just flip out. And so I got in trouble so much. And so then it really didn't, it's when I got older, there were more and more events, obviously, for me. And there were abductions involved and different things. Now, we've since learned that my granddaughter is the fifth generation of this. And as far back as we know, it was my grandmother who started in the late 1800s. Obviously, we don't know if it went any further back than that. And it's also on my father's side. So I don't know what the percentages of population that is known has it on both sides. I know that there are quite a few. So then I just reached a point where I had to start talking about it more. And I realized that the more that I opened up about it, the more that it helped healing in me. That it was like I could come out of the shadows and healing could really start. And so, there were a lot of things that my husband has experienced with me over the years and things like that. And of course, I had been doing research for ufologists and helping with some of their writing and different things behind the scenes, doing my own research. And then, I just got to where I was publicly doing it. And when I got to the point where I wrote a paper about the Cape Girardeau crash, and I was confronted by people that were like, you're going to have to use your real name, because I had been using my pen name on my post and everything. And people didn't know what my real name was. And of course, I kind of panicked, because it's really safe talking about things where you're not talking in your real name. But then it was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to have to register this to publish it on academia, and I'm going to have to come out. So I did that with a lot of consternation and, and at times I wish I was still using my pen name, but I think it sets a good example for people. I tell people, to be very cautious. I caution people who are young abductees and young experiencers that have their whole life ahead of them not to come out publicly and to, because you just don't know how it's going to affect your life. You don't know if you're ever going to be able to get a job, or if you're going to ever have a spouse, or if you end up getting a divorce because of all of this. So I give people a lot of cautions, and like one of my main things is protecting abductees and experiencers. That is like a real fight for me. I very strongly believe that a lot of what's going on as far as research can be very dangerous to abductees and experiencers. And I've written a paper on Medium about that, about the need to protect abductees and experiencers. And so anyway, along the way, I decided to jump into MUFON because that was a good way to obviously further my abilities and skills in researching and investigating. But I wanted to also be able to talk to the people that were witnesses and see, what their experiences were. And I know when somebody tells me a case, they don't have to tell me they're an experiencer. I know they're an experiencer by the thing going on. And, there is a question, are you an experiencer? And most all of them will say no. But, when you start to talk to them, they'll go, oh, yeah, well, I have seen these things before or experienced or whatever. So, I've talked to so many people in the past and present who are abductees and experiencers, and that includes doctors, lawyers, so all walks of life. And so, I know a lot of the signals involved in conversations about what's going on. I have a lot of people come to me for help and to, I advise them to see the doctors, but as far as ruling out other things, but I will also tell them, like, if they need to have an x-ray of an implant or something, I will tell them how to do that to where it doesn't raise suspicion or go in their records and stuff like that. That's stuff I've learned working with ufologists that specialized in that kind of stuff. So I just have a wide range of involvement and experience in this topic, and a lot more than that. But anyway.
Well, thank you for sharing your background. I truly appreciate the work that you're doing. I know a lot of people have spoken to you and asked for assistance. And I know, of course, some of those people talk to me and they say, oh, yeah, Linda is helping me and stuff. So I definitely appreciate what you're doing. So, my question, because of the audience that we're trying to reach is, the doctors and therapists. Did you have any physiological effects that you've experienced?
Yeah. I definitely have had physiological effects over time. It's, I would say, been mostly negative. There have been some things that have improved without explanation over time. I also had a mystery surgery on a craft that I wasn't aware of until I went through a regression, and that was everything about that abduction was awful, and it caused like car damage, just so many problems. And so it was very vivid. And so yeah, I thought long and hard about having a regression for that one because I didn't have all the answers to what happened on craft. And so after, considering it a long time and talking to people, I found somebody who I trusted to do a regression. And I would never have guessed that, I knew about an implant at the top of my skull that was there that I later had removed, but I had no idea I had had surgery on my ankle on craft. And the thing was, I had been having tests on my leg for possible cancer. I had a hot spot on my leg, and the doctors were evaluating what was going on with that. And so, you know, later it was like, yeah, I was having leg problems, but that was no longer an issue. The hot spot, the fear of cancer was no longer an issue. And I just blew it off. I had no idea. And then when I had the regression, I found out that they had done a surgery on my ankle to remove the tumor. And because they removed the tumor, I was told then that I would have damage in the leg, but it was not going to be, as detrimental as if I had cancer. And I was just like, this is crazy. So after I got the transcript and everything back and I was looking at it, and I had my husband read it, and I'm like, this is crazy. And so um, because of the way my leg is, I can't turn it to look to the side. And so I got a mirror and I saw this surgical scar that I never had surgery for. And I called my husband to come look at it because I was like just shocked. And he's like, yeah, that's a surgical scar. It's like not big or anything like that, but you could see it. And so I was like blown away. So, I've had other serious things in my health that have been helped along the ways, but like I have repeating heart problems with my, it's the rhythm. I've had ablation and implant device once before. I started having more problems. And so I've got another heart device again because of that. They're watching. And so, I've had a lot of physical effects. I've had the markings on me, the triangles. Like I have a mole that my dermatologist would probably, roll her eyes at because it's a triangle mole that I have appeared on my leg. So I go through a lot of that other people go through. And, so yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. I know it's hard to talk about some of those things, but I feel that the fact that you shared it will help other people recognize that perhaps it's something they need to also, at least get treatment for, or at least recognize, acknowledge. Um, did you ever tell your doctor, your physical doctors, about the experiences that you had?
No, I saw, well, I have one doctor I've had almost 20 years, and she is getting out of practice. And she's one person that has known. And I felt safe sharing with her because she told me about, she said it looked like a flying office building that she saw one day leaving her work. And so that kind of opened things up and we started talking. So she has known, but I also have had a psychologist that I had therapy for years about the anxiety and the PTSD that I had as a result of all of this. And I had a hard time figuring out exactly what I was dealing with at the time because, I mean, a lot of the stuff that had happened through me for the years, I was told growing up, oh, well, it was a dream or, whatever. And then I had started getting really bad, severe PTSD driving at night when I saw blue police lights. And I was like, this is crazy. I mean, my leg would be shaking so hard on the pedal that I could barely drive. I mean, it just sent me into like a total shock. So I was talking to, the counselor about this, and I realized what it was. And so she knew because the strange thing is, and she didn't fully divulge all of it until the last day that she was working. She retired and she had me come in and see her. And she told me that she knew the whole time what I was dealing with, and that her sister was like into really big in the UFO field and had done conferences and stuff. And she knew this whole time. And I was like, why didn't you tell me instead of me going through this whole thing and spending all this money and all? And her thing was, I didn't feel that it was healthy for me to do that. It was something you had to figure out what was going on your own. And I took that same stand with my son, which was difficult at the time, but we knew some things that he had been dealing with and that he had gone through. In fact, one of the abductions that he had was while we were talking to him on the phone one night. So we knew what had happened. And, I couldn't come out and say, this is what happened. I talked to a couple of different ufologists and then to her, and it was like, you can like answer questions he brings up and you can kind of, help him and assure him, but this is something that he needs to come to terms with on his own. And a lot of people say that's wrong, but, and there's things that we talk about now that happened when he was younger and otherwise. And, it's stuff that he can deal with and accept now since he's dealt with this other. But, so yeah, that was my experiences. And
Okay.
she says, you're really lucky because a lot of people who have gone through what you have either committed suicide, they become drunks or drug addicts, they've ended up in prison, they've ended up in mental hospitals because they couldn't deal with it and nobody could help them
Wow.
because, this supposedly doesn't happen. So, I was really thankful to her and for her honesty in that.
I'm gonna be more optimistic about it. I'm gonna try to say that there's a chance that if someone is able to express it to somebody, anybody, then they'll do better with mental health. So I think that's where we're coming to now, where
Mhm,
we're learning that
mhm.
we need to do better with letting people talk about it, and
Yeah.
ask the questions.
The first night I opened up about something on Twitter, it was connected to something that somebody else said, and it triggered that whole abduction that was really wild experience. And I went through the whole thing. This is many years ago. I went through the whole thing, and of course, everybody's like, "No, you shouldn't say that. You're going to be labeled crazy and everything." Well, whatever. But I cried the rest of the night. But it was such a load off of me for doing it that you know. And of course, like I said, at the time I was under a pen name, but it still started the healing process for me.
Do you think it would have been beneficial if you'd been able to talk to your therapist sooner? If you'd been able to just have the conversation sooner?
Yeah, I think especially if I had known she was open to it. Like I said, I knew I was dealing with it, um, not all of it. Like I said, there would be triggers, like the blue police lights at night that would trigger me, and I wouldn't understand why they were triggering me. But when I figured it out, I realized it's because I had gone through the blue beams for abductions, and a lot of people do. And so that is why I was getting triggered. The blue police car lights during the day did nothing for me at all. It was just normal, but I would have that reaction at night.
Okay. Um, and what else do you think would have been beneficial from your treatment providers?
Um, I don't know. I think you know, like I found that probably well, of course, going through experiencers and abductees, I've learned a lot of psychologists were abductees, were experiencers. And so, and that is one reason they got in the field, which makes me hopeful for the future treatment of people. But at the same time, it would help to know up front that you can be, up front and tell more without them, labeling you on the first day as crazy grade A. So I think that's something that needs to change, in that this is more acceptable and open to talk about.
Okay. And since you have spoken to many other experiencers, what do you think they have felt has been most helpful for them in healing? And and you said for you, just getting to talk about it has been very healing, but what has been most
Mhm.
helpful for you in general?
For me in general, I mean, my husband doesn't understand it all. He's been through stuff with me. He doesn't like to discuss it because, he didn't sign up for this. We've been married almost 43 years. Somehow, we're still together. But, you know, when we first got married, he didn't even believe there was anything such as ghost. So this is a long way that we've come over the years. But one night he couldn't find me in the house at all. And my cars were here, the keys were here, my purse was here. And it was like, I looked all over the house, you weren't here. This couldn't find you, looked everywhere. And so that was one of our, times that was really difficult to deal with. But, we've gone through other similar things. And we were in a hotel earlier this year, and I had a tracking tag that I had started wearing. One of my friends who has worked Intel security asked me to start wearing a security tag for my safety. And so my husband got an alert that I was no longer around, and it was the middle of the night. And so, yeah, I was not. And the next day, my knee was in a lot of pain and my eyes were like really, really bloodshot. So something had gone on. And, it's just really weird that it was a hotel in South Carolina and I was abducted.
So when I asked what would be beneficial to you, you mentioned your husband. So
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you could say whether or not there's been some benefit from him.
Yeah, I mean, there's been substantiation of stuff. Just And of course, my son too. We talk a lot, and my daughter-in-law, my son goes, "I don't get to talk to you at all when my wife's around, because all she wants to do is ask you questions and find out information from you." So the family has all been very supportive, and they're dealing with stuff on their own connected to it. But I think that's great that we've been able to talk about it. And you know, before we went before I went like public or was doing anything at all publicly about this, it was a few years ago. We went to the first Alien Con in Baltimore. I don't know if you were there or not, but
No,
we
I
went
haven't
to
been to.
that. And
No.
so it was in a November, and I kind of talked my husband into doing it for our anniversary. And so we did. And before we left home, I said, I don't know why, but I feel like our lives will never be the same after this. And that was true, because he got a lot of confirmation there of stuff that is going on. And so, it's just sometimes you never know, and who you run into or whatever, that makes a difference for people.
Okay, so it sounds like the family support is definitely one of those things that will help the people who are experiencing things related to UAPs, and obviously being able to express what happened to them or two of the big ones. I think having it sounds like a therapist that's supportive or open minded was another one that you identified. Is there anything else that you think people should hear in terms of doctors and therapists and any professionals dealing with experiencers?
Um, I just I think people need to keep an open mind about what's going on and not put boxes or labels on things. I usually use the term the others because I think there's multiple things going on. So it's better to take the labels off when discussing, because you will never get anywhere if a doctor or your preacher or whoever thinks that these are all demons. I mean, you know, um, there's so many things. I just think labels are very harmful in this discussion. So,
Yeah, one thing we've talked about is what to call an experiencer and how to delineate an experiencer versus someone who has just observed a
mhm.
UFO or a UAP. And that's
Well,
one of those things that gets tough because people debate that one.
yeah, abductees, to take away that stigma, experiencer term was used. And then it was muddied when everybody started calling themselves experiencers. So that has been very problematic because now we don't know, the people know, but as far as in a general discussion, we don't know, really what's going on. And like you say, if you see lights in the sky, a lot of people think that means they're an experiencer, which could be if they had gotten some kind of communication, telepathic message or something in connection with that. But if you're driving down the road and you think you see something and it's like, oh, yeah, well, whatever, you know, that's just seeing lights in the sky. So, that's not really any kind of real experience. I have also have had at least one MyLab experience and gone through that, the covert human abduction experience. Some have the others' involvement. Some believe that some of the military covert people dress up like aliens and sometimes pull the outfit off later. There's so many different variations, but the patterns are the same. And so that's another tough issue to get into, particularly when some high level people are involved in it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I often say it's important for people providing treatment not to get caught up in one theory or another because there's so many things, like you said, going on. And so many theories and hypotheses. We just really can't get caught on that because everyone may have different experiences or encounters with UAPs. For one, I
Mhm.
don't think I've heard two that have been exactly alike yet. So I think people
Yeah.
need to just be pretty open-minded and just be willing to let their patient guide the course of their treatment to some extent. However, it is worth noting, and you've said this as well, if someone has a medical issue, they should be seeking the help of a doctor for it irregardless.
Yeah. There's some people that have gone through NK ultra type experiences with this, particularly if they were in the Air Force or their parents were in the Air Force. That is something that is very strong. There's also some other things involved with covert training of certain individuals. All of that is pretty well established within the community if you do enough research. So, and there's people that, you know, you will interact with that definitely have what seems to be strong psychological issues and feel that they're being threatened and stuff like that by, you know, not just somebody who is harassing them, but also for bizarre out of the world statements. You know, they definitely need to be evaluated just for their own safety and before anything can be done to help them. That's something that I run into quite a lot. It's a difficult situation. You know, I was on the MUFON ERT team for a while, and like in Virginia, it's pretty useless because we don't have any practitioners in Virginia that will do anything with people. So, you know, it's just very difficult. All we can do is refer people out to, you know, ask them to contact y'all, ask them to contact Opus for further assistance. We can give them general information on, you know, how to find someone that could be helpful to them. But I got off the ERT team in Virginia because we really just don't have the resources available here. And I didn't feel like it was a good situation.
Right. It's worth saying for anyone who's listening, if you are a medical professional, especially we desperately need more medical professionals to be involved.
Mhm.
What's interesting is if you pay attention, there are quite a few that are quietly paying attention to this topic,
Mhm.
but we need them
Yes.
to be willing to help people. And some of them are experiencers or have seen a UAP themselves. So for them to sit back and not offer any assistance is a little discouraging. So
Right.
hopefully, we'll, yeah. I also will say we do have a fair number of psychiatrists who are, in fact, medical doctors who are interested. So they're a little
Mhm.
braver.
Right. That's good.
Right. So I wanted to thank you for coming today and sharing. Do you have any last statements that you would like to make to the medical and mental health professionals?
I think it's very critical that they realize that this is a genuine phenomenon and that, um, you know, it's much more widespread than people will admit. Um, Many doctors and attorneys and psychiatrists and all go through this themselves. Denial doesn't help anyone. And so it's something that, you know, I think there needs to be some kind of acceptance or a some kind of sign, something that when people start seeing like a psychologist or a therapist, that they know it's a safe place to discuss these topics.
Okay. Can you please let people if they have more questions or concerns?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so probably okay. So I'm on Twitter, Lynda underscore researcher on um, on Twitter. My MUFON email address is mufon.va.lynda, Lynda Thompson at gmail.com.
Okay, thank you again for coming today, Linda. I really hope that some people will either relate to what you talked about or come to ask more questions. I'm sure that you have a plethora of information. You have so much information, so people would really benefit from asking questions. Hopefully, that will continue the conversations that will help people overcome the stigma and get to a healthier healing place. Thank you
Right.
again for coming today. And for
Thank you.
everyone who was of course, and for everyone who was listening, thank you so much.